fact that Social Security has investments in Anglec shares, as well as the National Commercial Bank of Anguilla also has investments in Anglec shares, and both of them are 100% government owned. The government, at the end of the day, controls a total of 79% shares in Anglec, despite only being directly invested in 40% of the company shareholdings.
And how does that impact the selection of board of directors?
In terms of the selection of board of directors, so whenever an annual general meeting is held or a special meeting of the shareholders is held, the shareholders have the authority to appoint the persons who they feel are best positioned to direct or have the fiduciary control of the company and steer it. Government having control of 79% overall of the shareholdings means that ultimately government has the ability to choose who will be on that board and who will direct or be the stewards of the company going forward. Under the previous administration, a change was made to the legislation by which I believe you have to have a minimum of 30% shares in order to call a shareholders meeting. To be honest, that's a decision that I do have some mixed emotions about, because I do feel like it's unfair to the minority shareholders, because if government has 79% control of the shares, what that automatically means is that everyone else has a cumulative total of only 21%. So even if all of them were to come together, they could not necessarily exercise their right to want to call a shareholders meeting and make a decision. But recognizing that this was unfair and not being able to immediately change the legislation upon taking office, one of the things that I, on behalf of the administration, would have done before selecting the board is reach out to some representatives of the minority shareholders, get their feedback as persons who they feel would be good representatives and adequately be able to represent their interests and steward the company. So when we look at the composition of the board that was put in place in 2025 by our administration, it actually does have representatives that were informed by the minority shareholders. So I believe that this is the first time in history that government wholesale has not set a board due to their political influence, but has reached out, consulted with the minority shareholders, and has a board that reflects the interests of all parties involved.
That's wonderful. Excellent. And can you tell me to what extent you as minister, how involved are you in the day-to-day affairs of Anglec?
No, this is a very interesting topic because I've seen it really touched upon and debated within the public domain. And I want to set the air clear on certain matters. Persons in the public domain, at least some, would have expressed to me that they felt that my first actions as minister was to have overstepped and got overly involved in the affairs of the business. Reason being, when we would have assumed office, one of the first things I did was reach out to the chairman of the board at the time, and I would have expressed, like, there's a new minister, I'm happy to be working with you and your team, but I would prefer if you not make any significant decisions at the time that may compromise a new board coming in, because this was just a few days or weeks shy of the upcoming annual general meeting. And we would have expressed that it was our intentions to change the membership of the board. So ultimately, we would not have wanted any decisions to have been made that would tie the hands, so to speak, of the incoming board. We believe that while the board should be independent, they should be free as an incoming board to analyze the situation and make decisions as they see fit based on the policy direction given by the minister and the ruling administration. Despite having received reassurances verbally from the chairman at the time and from board members, there were actions, so to speak, to take place that were contrary to the reassurances that were given by the board at the time. I would have corresponded in writing, asking them not to make any decisions that were significant or would tie the hands. They would have agreed in writing, but still we were seeing certain actions taking place. For case in point, there was an advertisement made for a new CEO to be appointed and recruited in advance of the shareholders meeting. The board is fully within their remit to advertise for a new CEO, but I would have respectfully requested that at the very least, the deadline for that application date be put 2 weeks beyond that of the shareholders meeting, so that the incoming board would be able to take control and ownership over the process. Despite being given assurances that that would be the case, and a number of other assurances that were since violated, those requests were not honored. So ultimately, it resulted in having to go through the Attorney General's chambers and placing an injunction on the board so that they make no current decisions and requesting that they resign. So ultimately what happened was a caretaker board came into place, and until the shareholders meeting, and after which the full complement of the board would have been appointed in due course as per the procedure. So a lot of persons were saying that I interfered with the wishes of the board. But one thing that I want to make clear is the role of the board is to protect the fiduciary responsibility of its shareholders. So I mentioned earlier that as minister, I have the dual role, but government is a shareholder, one that controls 79% of the shares. So if the shareholders are telling the board, this is the direction we want to go, or this is a request of the majority of the shareholding, and the board is going in direct contravention to that, then as minister, I saw it fit to step in and stop the board, the incoming board, having their hands tied. And the reason that this has come up is because there was recently, under the current board, an advertisement for a CEO, and persons are now of the feeling that, oh, I should have stepped in or influenced the circumstance one way or another. But again, as minister, I appoint the board. It is the board's responsibility to handle the day-to-day operations, and if that is the course that they want to take, it would be wrong of me to then step in and interfere in that process, because that is now the current board. It's not facing an impending shareholders meeting, a change of the board, or any other extenuating circumstance. So as it relates to the daily operations of the company, that is not under my remit. I speak often with the chairman of the board. I speak with board members, but ultimately the day-to-day operations of the company falls within the remit of the board of directors as well as the CEO of the company.
So essentially, when there was a change of government back in February of 2025, you were seeking to set the policy direction by virtue of the installation of a new board under the new administration with the policy direction that the new administration wanted to go. Case in point, for example, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but let's say the power purchase agreements, discussions that took place prior to elections. Is that a policy direction that you wanted to go as minister with the new board after elections in 2025?
The simple answer to that is clearly no. We do know that under the previous administration, and I will say that both administrations, and I dare say all administrations, have had a focus to want to transition towards renewable energy. Where our administration, the previous administration, differed is in terms of the means of accomplishing that goal. The previous administration touted that they felt the best way to go was via a power purchase agreement, via which we bring in a third-party company to invest in a 25 megawatt solar farm, and then when they generate energy from our sun and our resources, they then sell that cheaper generated energy to the utility, which then sells it onward to the public at a lower cost. While I see merit in that argument, I'm also guided and cautioned by the situation that took place with our water. Because when we look at our water, we currently have essentially a similar format where a company comes in and takes our seawater, purifies it, and sells it to government. Despite 80% of it being lost in leaks, we pay for every drop of water that has been purified and desalinated. And I'm also minded by that, especially because when we look at what took place in Hurricane Irma, 95% of our electricity distribution was taken down. So what that would ultimately mean, God forbid, were a similar situation to take place again. The sun comes out a week later, they are able to generate, but we are not able to distribute. We being Anglec, who would still have the control of distribution, they would still have to be paid because they're generating the electricity. Right. But they have no responsibility or no direct incentive to build back up the distribution. So Anglec would be left holding the bag, similar to the way that the government of Angola is now holding the bag, paying for every drop of water lost in leaks or non-revenue water, despite it not getting to the people who deserve it. So our administration was firmly of the belief that no company is coming in here to do this and set up a power generation plant out of the goodness of their heart solely. Obviously, it has to be feasible and it has to be profitable. Anglec is one of the last remaining institutions that is 100% Anguillian owned. We talk about government owning 79% shares. All of the remaining shares are owned by the people of Angola. So it's a 100% Anguillian owned company. So we are firmly of the belief that if it is a profitable venture, that let the utility do it themselves. Let the people of Anguilla be able to participate in the profits and retain those economic benefits locally.
Okay, wonderful. And one final question for you, Minister, before we transition over to Mr. Carty. One of the policy decisions of this administration is for Anguilla to transition towards renewable energy. How does your ministry assist in doing so?
Okay, now that's a very interesting question. So our ministry is critical as it relates to government's involvement in the renewable energy transition. Now, Anglec as the utility and the sole power generator in Anguilla is truly at the heart of the renewable energy transition. But our ministry is responsible for not only setting the framework for them to be able to do so, but also we're in charge of the legislation such as the Electricity Act. We're in charge of the regulator, which falls under the Public Utility Commissions Act. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about doing and I would like to see advanced this year is the strengthening of the Public Utilities Commission. Because to date, while they are on the books as the regulator, that legislation was never really fleshed out. They are supposed to be the independent middleman between government and the utility. And I dare say at this point, even though I know we'll touch upon it at a deeper level somewhere later in the conversation, that the biggest issue that I personally feel Anglec has had thus far, and the reason we have not accomplished the renewable energy transition, is due to political interference. So I do think that it's important that we separate government, despite its important role as the policymaker and its significant role as the majority controlling shareholder, from the utility by putting in place that independent regulator. When you look at successful renewable energy transitions throughout the region and throughout the world, that is a critical aspect that currently in today's situation in Anguilla is missing. And it is something that I as minister, and I know us as an administration, are adamant and completely laser focused on achieving on behalf of the people of Anguilla. That will ensure that the renewable energy transition is done in a fashion that will be successful for generations to come.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And it is my pleasure to provide a brief introduction to Mr. David Carty, who is known across the length and breadth of Anguilla. Mr. David Carty is a prominent Anguillian figure, known as a master boat builder. He is the co-owner of Rebel Marine. He is deeply involved in the history and techniques of Anguillian racing boats, often highlighting them as a cornerstone of island culture. Mr. Carty is a vocal advocate for climate change mitigation, urging the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy. He also was previously engaged in politics, was a former Speaker of the House, first nominated member and parliamentary secretary, and he has been involved in political campaigns focusing on sustainable development. He is also an eloquent storyteller and writer, and anyone who has listened to Mr. David Carty speak will know when he speaks that he is an eloquent storyteller indeed. And he is a passionate advocate for the preservation of Anguilla's natural and cultural landscape. Tonight, he is here in the capacity as chair of Anglec board, and I forgot to mention he was also former chair of Anglec board under a previous administration as well. So Mr. Carty, welcome, and thank you for joining us at Just the Facts.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Minister. Glad to be here.
Mr. Carty, you've been advocating for renewable energy for quite some time, at least as far back as the early 2000s when you were Speaker of the House. Can you give us the historic background on Anglec, the work of the Select Committee on Renewable Energy that you initiated, and what drove your passion to champion this cause?
Yes, well, my passion derived primarily, surprisingly, from an environmental perspective, not from an economic one. I am a firm believer that climate change is very, very, very real. I have studied it extensively for most of my life. I believe the science is active and the science is real, and I think after all these years, the evidence is mounting incontrovertibly that it is a real phenomenon. I've spent my whole life working for my homeland in public and private service, and I've always felt that Angola's vulnerability to extreme environmental change is acute. We are 35 square miles of God-given real estate. We are a tiny, tiny society. And the impact of climate and global environmental phenomena on us can be extreme. We've seen that very eloquently with Hurricane Irma, but it can be far more subtle in many ways. The erosion of our beaches, the creeping sea level rise, the destruction of our reefs from increased salination and carbon dioxide settling as a sink for greenhouse gases, disturbing our marine life in long-term ways that are going to affect us affect Anguillan society long after I am gone, and we are all gone. And that was the driver for me. I felt that we had to do something to play our part, as small as it would be, in limiting greenhouse gases. Of course, up to today, and it still is as when I started preaching on this issue, if I may use that word, the emissions of carbon dioxide in Anguilla primarily come from our vehicles and Anglec. Anglec is perhaps the biggest producer of greenhouse gases. You just need to go down to the power station in Carty and look up at the stacks, and you can see greenhouse gases being emitted into the atmosphere every second of every day. So that was a driver for me. And what we tried to do when I was speaker was very unique. I had to hold my breath because, as you know full well, the speaker in our Westminster system is supposed to be extremely independent and not take sides on any issue. But I was able to persuade both sides of the House that this is something that needs to be thought through. And I was volunteering my time as speaker to effect the raising of awareness in a far more aggressive and formal way, with meetings and going around and talking to people and influencing government. So it was interesting that the opposition side of the House agreed to it, very interestingly. And we were able to set up what was called the AREO, the Anguilla Renewable Energy Organization. I served as chair without any salary or any remuneration, but we had a full-time secretary, Miss Beth Barry. And we went down to every single church in Anguilla. We spoke to all religious groups. We framed the issue in religious terms, using Psalms, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the earth and all that dwell therein. Trying to show Anguillians that this issue is foundational to our future. And renewable energy was one way of limiting our contribution to greenhouse gases. So it wasn't economic when we started out. It wasn't so much about reducing electricity costs. It was about a long-term vision of sustainability, conservation, environmental stewardship, etc. Now it has morphed because obviously when I look back at how it started, it's hard to get people excited about telling them about sea level rise when it's such a creeping phenomenon that you don't see it. But, people got to pay electricity bills every single day. It's an economic reality. So that's when, we started to also push the idea that we could reduce costs with all the sunshine we had. We didn't have the technology then that we have now that can make that a reality. But to get to the point, that was the driver of my passion for renewable energy. It still is. I'm still very, very passionate. I love my grandchildren to death, and I hope that they have grandchildren, and I hope that they still live in 35 square miles of paradise. So what happens to their environment is a responsibility of mine and my generation.
How long ago were you Speaker of the House? What period of time
2015 for 5 years.
2015?
Yeah, 2010 to 2015. 2010 to 15.
2010 to 2015.
15 years.
And the Anguilla Renewable
Ario, yes.
Organization was created when?
I think it was like, when I got the courage to ask the House to do it, I think it was 2011, 2012 that it was established. And it lasted for the full 3 years. The government of the day, the Minister of Finance at that time was Mr. Banks. Mr. Banks was very supportive of it and put in a little bit of funding for it. And so was the Overseas British Development Office. I can't remember the name that they had at that time. They put a little money in it, and we were able to hire consultants from the National Energy's Renewable Lab in Colorado,
Right.
USA, to help us figure out what renewables could do in terms of conserving fuel.
I think even before my foray into politics in 2010, you were already identifying the issues, sounding the alarm in terms of the environment and the concerns in renewable energy before 2011.
Before,
yes.
I was just about to say, Madam Premier, and I know the day has been quite a long one, and we're sorry for pulling you out so late, but if my memory serves me correct, you were Speaker of the House between 2005 and 2010. The Banks administration left office in 2010, so it was before that.
Yeah, maybe I'm
Yes, and I believe that your report was published in 2007.
Okay. Well,
Wow, you got me there.
It's just the facts, so I have to pull it up.
Yeah. No, no, it was, oh Lord, you got me there. I'll have to think that through a bit more.
Long time. Mr.
But I
Carty.
remember, yes, Premier, you were at a major meeting we had at the, what was the government of Mr. Osborne Fleming? What year was that?
The AUF between 2000 and 2010, and 2000 to 2005, and then 2005 to 2010.
Okay, it was then. Sorry, you're right. 2005 to 2010.
Okay.
We did a major presentation at the Teachers Resource Center where we showed graphics of what would happen to a future Anguilla with sea level rise based on science, based on the increase of carbon dioxide. And it was very impactful if you saw a graphic where Sandy Ground didn't exist or Cap Juluca didn't exist. And it was very futuristic, but it helped to make the case that we needed to transition away from the consumption of fossil fuels, and the only way to do that was to go to renewables in a serious way.
Right. So the minister will have made mention of a 2007 report that will have been generated under your hand through the organization. And that report actually led the way forward in terms of where governments should be heading in terms of renewable energy. And since then, several studies have been conducted by various parties. Despite these studies and conversations, do you think that meaningful progress has been made, certainly since between 2005, 2010, when you were Speaker of the House, and today, 2026, in terms of renewable energy?
Not anywhere near as much as I had hoped. It was very frustrating, very disappointing. The Anglec did make one move when they tried to do the 1 megawatt that was destroyed by Hurricane Irma. That was a step in the right direction. And in fact, that was the only step that ever took place. I think that, realistically, the pitch that we put forward at that time was actually a failure, because we made what I thought was a well thought through, well articulated storytelling kind of case that this is why a small society needs to do this. But both the government and Anglec never really bought into it.
And now we're here in the region, we have leaders across the region speaking about these countries, these islands in the Caribbean being on the front line.
Yep.
Same thing that you've been talking about from as far back as before 2010.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And you served as director of the board of Anglec between 2022 and 2023.
Yes.
And you now sit as chairman of the board from 2025 to now. And how was your experience on the board back then? And how does it compare to your experience today in relation to renewable energy?
In relation to renewable energy, I can't say that what the comparison is. With a big difference in other ways. I served as chairman in 2022 for only 5.5 months. I was uniquely elected as a director because of a failure of the government to vote properly under the bylaws at the annual general meeting. They did not submit the names of their selected candidates, even though they had, as you correctly pointed out, Minister, 79% of the votes. And I was uniquely able, with the massive support of the minority shareholders, to be elected as a director. And I think I'm the only person who's ever been elected to the Anglec board by minority shareholders. I may be wrong, but I think I'm right on that.
First for you.
Yes. So right after my election, I was unanimous, and I was elected chair. And my tenure lasted for 5.5 months before the government called a special meeting to get us out. So politics reared its head again, and we only lasted for 5.5 months. But I have to say that those 5.5 months were extremely productive. At that, Mr. Sutcliffe Hodge was the CEO at that point in time, and he and I, though we had before some political differences in the way Angular should go, we saw eye to eye on renewables in a very, very, very close way. And the board was supported by people like Mr. Pat Mardenborough, who was chairman just before me, Mr. Jerome Roberts, Max Hodge, Cameron Lloyd, Derek Gums, and others. And they threw their back into the idea of trying to move on 8 megawatts and get it funded by CDB. And I made a presentation to the board, and then we made a presentation to all the shareholders at the church on Pastor Phillips Church. We went public with it. We connected with CDB, and CDB was extremely helpful and willing to make it happen because they, at that time, were very concerned about the same environmental issues, greenhouse gas emissions and all the rest of that. They were very supportive. And we were on a roll. I thought that it was a go. They got the technical support of WSP, which is back in the news again today with us. And, you know, they were very, very willing to move ahead with us. We did the numbers, we did the basic assumptions, we did the science that we needed to do. And I really thought that this was a go, and then boom, things changed. And my board was effectively dismissed.
So you made mention that there were, in relation to renewable energy, there weren't as many differences, but otherwise,
right.
What were those differences?
The huge difference between that board and the board I now chair is twofold. The board I now chair has a much broader perspective in terms of how Anglec as a company should move into the future. It is not as laser focused, although it is very focused on renewables. Its focus is much wider and in a very good way. All the other ramifications that have to come into play to make a successful organization, issues of governance, which is huge, issues of human resource development, audit and financial controls and so on. The board I now chair is far more effective, equipped, laser focused on all of the pictures. Mm-hmm. So there's no dilution of effort with respect to renewables, else I wouldn't be there. But it's much broader. Whereas the board I chaired for 5.5 months was just, let's get 8 megawatts into the system and see how that works.
And we'll talk, you made mention of CEO of Sutcliffe Hodge at the time in 2022. Anglec were put out to notice recently that they were recruiting for a new CEO in December of last year, as opposed to extending the contract of the CEO at that time. What can you tell us about this and how that came about?
Well, first let me preface my remarks this, Premier, in saying that I'm speaking through you and the Minister to a shareholder, and I have, I think, a fiduciary responsibility to speak to all shareholders. So I would make a caveat to say that whatever I say from here on in about what is happening in the company, I say it with caution, because I should really be reporting to all the shareholders and not just to you and the Minister as a major shareholder. But most of all that I'm saying is already in the public domain, so I don't think I'm on too much of a shaky ground. Well, what had happened back when Mr. Mardenborough was chair before my tenure, he wanted to get in a new CEO, and a panel was established, independent panel of people who had nothing to do with Anglec, but who had views on what could happen. And that panel was asked to select a new CEO. I was on that panel. And again, I was on that panel from the perspective of renewables. And that panel selected Mr. Hodge. So he was given a contract, and this was before I was chairman, before I was elected. He was given a contract for 3 years. His contract, although he had a hiatus, expired in December last year. So the board decided to replicate the whole process and set up a panel to examine the issue and make recommendations. And that was done. Done by experts again, many of them in renewables, utility management, etc. And that panel recommended a new person, which we are in the process of interviewing, not finalized yet. And that's where we are. So it's simply a replication of how the CEO is appointed. Instead of the board just jumping in and choosing one, we set out terms of reference for what we want, both in the panel and from what we want to see the CEO to issues that, what we want the CEO to achieve, and then allow a panel to do the selection.
So in the same way that the CEO was initially selected, that led to a 3-year contract.
Right.
At the end of the 3-year contract was the same structure that was set up for the selection of a CEO. And it could have been Mr. Hodge, it could have been someone else.
Yes.
And in this case, someone else may have come out on top.
Yes. The panel recommended another individual who we are in the process of selecting. I can say that much. I can't say any more on that because we have not yet signed the contract.
Well, we appreciate the information you have provided in relation to that this evening. And how soon, or can you tell us, how soon and that person, what was the process for
I'm hoping that's very soon. But here again, I would prefer to wait until that is finalized.
Yes.
And the go-betweens have completed their work. But I hope it's soon, because it's been very difficult running the company without a CEO fully.
Yeah, I mean, you have an acting CEO.
We have an acting CEO,
have one,
Mr. Sylvan Brooks, who has been the chief technical officer for many, many years. Very, very able technical person. but he's feeling the pressure too, I'm sure, as we all are.
Yeah.
And I
And,
can say that for myself.
and while we're speaking about administrative matters in relation to Anglec, there were 2 persons who were placed on administrative leave
Yes.
in 2025. What can you tell us about that situation?
I really can't say much about that, Premier, because that is still under active investigation, and it's a matter that may well be sub judice. So again, I think I will have to decline respectfully to answer that question in any more detail.
All right, fair enough. You made mention of CDB. Let's talk
Right.
about CDB. Let's
Right.
talk about what's happening. And you made mention between 2020, the 5.5 months, you were focused, you had initiated discussions while you were
Yes.
part of that previous board with the CDB. Can you tell us, have there been any discussions with CDB since taking up the chairmanship position in 2025, and where are we today?
Well, we've had serious discussions with CDB, and we are almost on the home stretch. As I'm sure the minister has already indicated publicly, CDB did formally agree to giving us and giving Anglec a loan. We had formal notification of that on the 14th of February.
Say that again. Sorry. You've had discussions with CDB.
All right, but let me back up, Minister, Premier, and give you a better.
Yes,
we
thank you.
invited CDB back in June, was it? My dates are getting fuzzy now. To begin the discussion as to what it would take to get the financing for what we determined was a 12 megawatt, because we upped the ante from 8 to 12. So they came with a full team, and they did huge due diligence with the company, mainly with management, not with the board, checking on our financial outlook or how we staff the company, how the company is run, the assets of the company, the liabilities of the company. Then, as you surely know, they had independent meetings with you as the government, asking about your position on whether renewables were your thing or not. So they did a lot of due diligence, a good thorough, it was very, very, very thorough. They had an environmental specialist, economic, human resource, risk management, a whole team. And then they went back to Barbados, and it was a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. CDB is the downside, very, very bureaucratic organization. Oh gosh, the amounts of T's and T's that have to be crossed and I's that have to be dotted, oh my God. But they were the game in town that we knew we had a very good chance of getting the financing from. So we played the game. And we successfully got their agreement to fund the cost of a 12 megawatt solar farm, fully backed by BESS, battery energy storage systems. On the 14th of January, so 14th of February. We got formal notification on the 14th of February. Where we are at now is there's a lot of back and forth, because when they gave us the terms of the loan, obviously we would have to be very careful in going through every page, not a 3-page document, a couple, well over 100 pages. So we had to the board split itself into various tasks, one section of the board dealing with this, the other, to answer the questions and to ensure that we are in good shape. I think we're just about there. We should be hopefully finalizing it very, very, very shortly. And then we have to go into meeting certain conditions that they require, which are actually quite good, in that we have to establish a team of experts that make sure that this 12 megawatts is set up the right way, done the right way, with expert management, project management unit. That's our next big step. But I am confident the train has left the station. And I say that, and I can say this strongly to you and to the people of Anguilla who may be listening, that there are three foundations to a successful transition to renewables. You have to have a plan. You have to know what makes sense. The board went into a lot of discussions and had a strategic retreat where this issue was ventilated thoroughly. I led the issues of renewables, while others led financial issues and human resource issues and management issues. It was an overall strategic review and plan, which certainly didn't happen in the former board that I chaired. So this board has been very thorough in trying to get a vision for what Anglec as a company needs to go. So the renewables were a huge, huge part of that. And again, it was based on math, the science. We get 3,000 plus hours of sunlight per annum. Radiation is this. If we have 12 megawatts, they will generate this much kilowatt hours of energy per day if we have solid sunshine, and what the percentages of loss would be if we had a lot of cloud cover or rain. So all of that was, figured through, and we settled on 12 megawatts because our bill, prior to the awful situation we and the whole planet are in right now with this war in Iran, is that Anguilla, and this is something that just aggravates the heck out of me. We pay $80 million a year to buy diesel.
Say that again?
We spend $80 million a year to buy diesel to keep these lights on. I find that unconscionable. And that's why I have been such a proponent of this. That is just downright wrong. So what we have done is we've made assumptions based on science that if we install 12 and figured out how that would work, 12 would perhaps save us as much as 25 to 26% of that cost. And then we did the numbers. The math on what the loan would cost us was like 30% of what we would save. So we had enough, we could pay the loan easily with that kind of savings and put a good bit under the mattress, or hopefully reinvest in further renewables. The second foundation after the strategic plan was access to land. Renewables need land. If you buy a 6 megawatt spinning reserve engine, a diesel engine like what we pump out about 16 megawatts a day now at Carty with big Wadzilla engines. An engine only takes up a house lot, 2,000 square feet or a little bit more. But renewables, whether they're solar or wind, you need land, you need real estate. So and that was always a huge issue. There was always talk about why we don't use the ponds. I thought in the early days we could use Carl's Pond as a huge solar farm. But there was always the horrific expense of funneling the electricity from the renewables back to the corridor and then into the distribution center system, because as Minister, you intimated in your opening remarks, distribution and generation are two different issues. And if people think about it, Anglec is actually two companies. One company deals with generating electricity, which is the Carty power station, and the other part is distributing it. The poles, the wires, the transformers all across the island. So that was a huge cost, but we pulled off a hat trick with being able to utilize the 5 acres that we had leased from government years ago. And we bought, with savings that Anglec had generated over the last 3 or 4 years, 14 acres right adjacent to the power station, free and clear, owned by Anglec. And then with the help of your government, which was huge, we added another 32 acres of crown lands right close to the dump, close to the power station. So all contiguous to the Corridor power station. That is huge because what it does, it easily takes care of the 12 megawatts that we intend to build, and it allows future boards of Anglec and future governments, if they want to, and I hope they do, continue the transitions to renewables. All the land is there already. So no future board of Anglec has to worry about, oh, where are we going to get land to put on renewables. That is a huge step, and I'm very, very, very happy that this board has been able to achieve that, because future boards are going to benefit from that step enormously. And then the third thing was capital, to get the money to buy the solar farm, the panels, to buy all the big batteries, because we are relying very heavily on BESS. We want to move the system where people think that as soon as the sun sets, the solar farms are out of business. That's not true. If you have the right battery system, all the energy from the solar farm goes into the battery. The batteries then feed into the distribution. So if you have excess charging power coming in from the solar panels or the solar farm, the batteries can run and feed into the distribution system well after the sun goes down, 6, 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And that, again, translates into huge savings of fuel. And that's the bottom line, how to get that 80 million down. Now, I wish I could tell you that this board will achieve that. I don't think it will. But this board certainly intends to achieve the 12 megawatts, absolutely. And I think the 12 megawatts, once it is done, will provide all the data that the company needs, that the government needs, that the ministries needs, that industry needs, to know how we keep moving from 12 to 25 to 36, and whether we should use wind. That's add wind to the mix of renewables. So I am very confident that I can say publicly soon, on behalf of the board, that the train has left the station.
Wonderful.
I'm very happy to hear.
Did you have a question, Liz?
So there's one thing I want to add for context, but these sessions are so important for public information because I myself just learned something, so I do want to ask a clarifying question. But before I get to that clarifying question, Mr. Carty would have explained the importance of capital and financing. And I just want to share for the people of Anguilla some of the challenges that we face as a British overseas territory in being able to access that financing. Mr. Carty would have mentioned that in June of last year, the Board of Anglec would have started engagements with CDB, inviting them here and beginning discussions towards the transition. But what actually sparked that initial conversation in June was in April of last year, I would have had the opportunity to travel and represent not only the ministry, but the government of Anguilla at the Caribbean Renewable Energy Forum. This brought together persons who are interested in either providing renewable energy resources, providing the financing, or persons like Anguilla, government representatives, trying to figure out how do we get access to that funding. I sat through many presentations by the IMF, the European Union, private financing institutions, different banks, different governments. And the message that they were all on stage saying is the time for the renewable energy transition is now. The money is there, but you just need to tap into it. So I felt like a kid in a candy shop at Christmas time running around saying, we got to get some of this money to bring back to Anguilla. And you go to the IMF, you go to the European Union, you go to these private funders, and time again, the message that kept on being said is, sorry, but the financing, we do have this financing available, but it's only for the independent countries. It's only for the independent territories. So as a British overseas territory, we were not able to access that financing. As one of the German companies put it, they basically said, the UK made the decision to leave the European Union. Why should us as a German company, backed by financing of the German government, fund your transition when the UK made a decision to leave us. That's Germany financing you when really and truly it should be the responsibility of the United Kingdom government. Which I found was a fair point, but I felt it left us between a rock and a hard place because the money is there. They want to give it to you, but it's so difficult and out of reach for you to access. So then, someone directed me and let me know that a representative was attending from the FCDO, the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So I was just like, okay, we have some hope. So I approached the representative from the FCDO and I said, I've gone to everyone here, but unfortunately, by virtue of our status as a British overseas territory, we can't access that financing. But we're here with you as a British overseas territory. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to access financing through you for our utility, Anglec, to be able to realize this transition. Only to be told that the representative made mention that there are different branches of the FCDO. And the branch that she represented at the time does not provide funding to British overseas territories. They too only provided funding to independent territories. I felt completely at a loss. It was a very surreal experience. So I said, let me just get one thing straight to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying. They all have money and I can't access their money because I'm a British overseas territory. You're here from the FCDO, which represents the United Kingdom. So technically I'm here with you and I can't access your money because the money you have is for the other independent countries. There was an awkward moment of silence, as I could expect that you understand. She was like, yeah, kind of. And at that point, I felt somewhat defeated. To be fair, she did introduce me to some of the UK ministers who came in the next day. But ultimately, of all the partners who were there, it was only the CDB who, when approached, I would have met the president of the CDB and his entire team on the final day of the conference, when I would have pleaded Angola's case, Anglec's case, and the vision that we have, not only for the renewable energy transition, but development on a wider scale. And the CDB president at the time was just like, we want to be a partner with you on the journey. And I thank President Daniel Best for that up until this day. We speak very regularly. He's been on his team pushing them to move as quickly as they can. And we stay in regular communication because he is committed and he's committed his team to seeing Angola through on this journey. But the clarifying question that I had that came up was, despite the good conversations with CDB and seeing their efforts and their commitment to realizing this transition, I didn't realize that during your tenure on the board, the 5.5 months in 2023 thereabouts, that you also had conversations with the CDB and that they were in agreement. And the reason that I didn't have that impression was the government of the day was supporting the PPA idea and that trajectory by saying that Anglec could not secure a loan, that the CDB would not support it because government had to co-sign and that would require UK approval. And so I was quite confused, surprised to hear you say that during your time you had the CDB support. Because based on my understanding and speaking to President Best, they were just waiting for a government that was aligned with the utility and had the shared vision. Well, my understanding was that Anglec just needed the blessing of government. So if CDB was on board and you were already engaged, my clarifying question is, why were you not able to achieve the progress that we have achieved today through our engagements with CDB back when you first engaged with them in 2023?
Short answer to that, Minister, is politics. But before I answer that in more detail, you touch on a sore point for me. I find, and I can say this, you both have constitutional responsibilities.
You don't.
And you have to work with the British government. I do not. I am not responsible to any British official. I found the British government to be absolutely hypocritical in its positioning with respect to renewables in the overseas territories, and particularly in Angola. When I was Speaker of the House, I attended a conference by the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in the Houses of Westminster on climate change, where all parliaments across the global parliamentary system were gathered together to discuss the threat of climate change. And I think that was in 2009. In that very meeting, the first climate change legislation on the planet was passed by the House of Commons. And I received a copy of Hansard, which you know is the record of the House of our Parliament. I received a copy of Hansard before the Queen had signed it into law in the meeting that we had for the climate change. I couldn't believe that Hansard could be produced so quickly. So the House of Commons passed it last night, and the next morning we were given copies. And the British government went to town bragging about the fact that they were the first country on the planet to move climate change legislation. So I say, yo, well, we cooking on gas because we're an overseas territory. You have said over and under, you, the British government, that that what, 80%, I can't remember the high percentage, about biodiversity rests with the overseas territories. Right. So I guess Anguilla got a little part of that big percentage. So step up and help us, especially as we are so vulnerable not only to sea level rise, but hurricanes and all the rest of that. Vulnerability index of a small island like Anguilla is off the charts, right? Zero, zilcho, nothing. And to this day, I find that though we have been successful, I think we will be successful with CDB and going forward. The British government's position is utterly hypocritical. When I was chairman in 2022, 2023, I had like hell, if I may use that word, to get a meeting with the former governor, to talk about this very issue. And the hoops I had to go through just to be able to go down to Old Tar to talk to the governor about why you need to step up again. The British government really needs to step up and help Anglec make his tradition. Well, that's another story I won't bore you with. But in that very meeting, I raised the issue that President Biden and the US administration at that time were doing a lot for the independent countries in getting climate renewables into the system. What are you doing for the overseas territories? Zero. So don't go there. I would have choice words for any British official who wants to talk to me about how wonderful things are in Anguilla. But back to your point, Minister, you're right. The CDB issue, all CDB requires, which they have required of you, and this is why we are here today, is for you to say our policy is to go for renewables. You don't have to do it, the utility has to do it, but you have to say as a government that your policies align with what the utility is doing. That's it. There's no sovereign, there's no obligation for a sovereign loan. They're not saying, oh, we need the government to backstop the debt. As you well know, there's been no negotiation with the government with CDB. The negotiations where we are today has been entirely between Anglec and CDB.
So if that is the case, what was the difficulty in getting approval? What was the government of the day saying back then?
Again, I have to say, what I find disappointing is that the former government, in their campaign for renewable energy. That was the fact. They did that. I supported them on that. I supported them on the point that they were making at that time, that Anglec should not be sold. I agreed with that. And they campaigned with that, and I supported that. And I was just stunned that in the middle of a board moving an agenda that I thought you would support, we were down the road with CDB, we had 8 megawatts planned, that you would just pull the plug and dismiss the board. Well, and what really upset me personally was comments made by the former Premier in the House of Assembly, in the shelter of the House of Assembly, when he described the board that we had at that time as one that was illegal. Mm. And I had difficulty with that. I wrote him a strong letter saying that, the board that I chaired was elected under the bylaws of the company, legally. There's nothing illegal about it. And you went through a legal process to remove us. I'm not complaining. It was done legally. He never responded.
So I can tell you, as Minister of Finance, that we have not been requested by CDB or any aspect of CDB to underwrite, co-sign, take responsibility for the loan that has been awarded to Anglec. And so let me take this opportunity on behalf of the government of Anguilla to thank you and the board for the work that you've done so far in getting us where we are. And I'm excited to hear you use the word imminently. But tell us, what does a 12 megawatt solar farm mean for the average Anguillian?
Right. Well, putting the bacchanal that the whole planet is in now with what's happening in the Middle East, which is just a nightmare for us. Our objective is very clear: to move in at least 3 phases. Phase 1 being solar, phase 2 being either wind or solar. We want to be cautious on that. And phase 3, leveraging the technologies of green technology. And this is not our board. This has to be a new board. This is not next year. This is down the road. But set out a strategic plan that other boards can follow, even if they want to tweak it here or there to make it more efficient as technologies improve. But I believe, absolutely, that Anguilla can wean itself completely off fossil fuels, completely, and be net zero by 2035, if not before. I am absolutely convinced of that. If governments and the boards of Anglec, present and future, keep their nose to the grindstone, keep the focus. That means that we're no longer spending millions and millions and millions of dollars on a fuel over which we have absolutely no control, right? We are utilizing God-given free resources of wind or solar or sunshine. That must mean that the cost of electricity will plummet. And therefore, that passes on to every single citizen. The board of Anglec, just like you, the government, just like every other Anguillian, don't want to hear nothing about no fuel surcharge. That's a bad word, right? And I agree with people who get very frustrated with Anglec when Anglec has to do this. But that's the reality. We have failed, we being Anglec, and the government have failed in the past to move this transition, to move the needle on this issue. It is now happening. Yeah, it's now happening, but people are ticked off, right? And I understand that. I can't blame them, I can't curse them. But we just have to do what we have to do, because if you move Anglec, I am also of the firm view that at the end of the day, the utility will always be the cheapest and most efficient way for you to pass on the costs. Yes, the technologies are available now for people to buy their own solar. That's already real. St. Thomas has the highest penetration of private solar of any territory in the Caribbean. But if you study what has happened in St. Thomas, it is as a result of the failure of the utility that has created that environment where people get so fed up. Right? That is the threat to Anglec. Anglec has, I would argue, had to do this years ago. Well, I can't cry about that any longer. We're doing what we got to do now. And we're moving the needle on that. So, and we're dead serious about it, and we mean to get it done. But yes, Premier, at the end of the day, we're simply trying to achieve an independence in energy control, where we do not have that now. I spoke about this on more than one occasion, where the very fact that we have to bring tankers with fuel into Anguilla. A couple of weeks ago, the tanker could hardly land because the weather was so bad. And this happened for real in Montserrat a few years ago, where the tanker was coming up to drop off fuel for Anglec, the Montserrat utility. A bad ground sea was on. The captain made a determination that he couldn't hook up to the fuel line, so he made a determination to go and drop off some fuel in the BVI. And on the way back, he would stop in St. Thomas, in Montserrat, and fuel up again. Give them the fuel that they needed. When he got back to Montserrat, the sea was still bad. He couldn't land the fuel. Anglec ran out of diesel, Montserrat shut down except for government offices. And the government offices didn't shut down because the government offices had renewable energy. That's the kind of vulnerability we face, where we are at the mercy of all of these global machinations over which we have no control, including the fact that the board just passed a resolution for a new contract for fuel in the face of Seoul buying Delta. So now there's no competition between the two fuel suppliers and Anglec. You got one monopoly, Seoul. Whatever Seoul want to sell you the diesel for, you got to buy. That's a crazy position for a little island like ours to be in. And that has to stop and that has to change. And the job for that is Anglec has to take the lead on that in a very, very serious way, and it has to be supported by the government.
Mr. Carty, as we sit right now, we are aware of the geopolitical tensions.
Yeah.
We're aware of the war in Iran, and we're aware of the rising costs in fuel, in shipping, cost of goods. What would you say to the people of Angola right now in order to focus them in terms of what we should be doing as individuals, as families, to anticipate what is to come over the next few weeks?
That's a very good question, Premier, and a very hard one to answer. There are a couple of things. People have to realize the gravity of the situation. If a barrel of oil has gone from $67 a barrel to I think it is 102 today, oil is a globally traded commodity. There is absolutely nothing anybody, even those who can drop the bombs, who have the power to drop the bombs, even they cannot control those market forces. But if they can't control it, what about us, right? You know, the vulnerability for a village like ours is just crazy. But that is the reality. If 20%, and this came up in our strategic review, we spoke about the Straits of Hormuz in our Anglec strategic review a couple of months ago. So this is although it is a shock, it is not entirely unexpected from our perspective. But the reality is that if 20% of the oil that comes out, that is used on the planet, comes out of one place, then the prices go crazy everywhere else. And we're stuck. So the $80 million bill that we've been paying per annum for diesel could well go to $120 million in the next few months. Well, it wouldn't be in the next few months, but it would go to a level that annualized over a year, it would be $120 million. What do we do? What do we do? I have asked our board to seriously address this question. And we're going to have serious discussions with your government as to how this is alleviated. And it's deeply worrying, deeply worrying. And it just goes to show why we're so late in getting out of this jam we're in. But again, we have to be positive, we have to be faithful, and we have to understand that if we really put our backs to it, we can get out of it. Because the technologies are there, the funding is there. And the other thing too, Premier, Minister, is if the data from what we're doing proves to be correct, and I'm confident it will be correct, the ability for us to get future financing to move to another 12 megawatts, to step up the renewables, would be huge, would be easy, much, much easier than CDB. Not that CDB was bureaucratically hard, but I think we can even get local financing or financing from other sources. That would be very easy. The other thing too is that one of the good things about the CDB loan is the fact that we're obligated to set up a proper management unit to implement it. Now the skills transfers that they will impart, and some of them being Anguillian, to Anguillians, would mean that if the next board wanted to move the needle and carry this further, we would have all the skills we need in Anguilla to do this by ourselves. So I am very positive and bullish. But Premier, there is no easy answer for the people of Anguilla, except to say, hey, we might have to go into conservation seriously
I
for
think
a while.
from a government standpoint, we're looking at different aspects. We're looking at capping the cost of fuel. We're looking at the imports, and we are also looking at the various capping the costs at the gas stations as well. Those are areas that we're looking actively at right now. But I think that the average Anguillan probably needs to understand and appreciate that if they haven't really noticed the price increase, they will very shortly, as long as this situation in the Middle East continues. And so I would encourage persons to conserve, to pay attention to the usage. We also know that there is a capacity issue on island in terms of how much we can actually store on island for in excess of maybe 3-4 weeks. And so all of those factors we're looking at as well, but we want to be able to ensure that Anguillians understand that in this space and time right now, we have to do every bit that we can to pay attention to our usage, to conserve as much as possible, because what we're going to see over the next few weeks, etc., is not just going to be impacted in Anguilla, but worldwide.
Yes, and don't forget that oil is also used in making fertilizer.
That's right.
And fertilizers can't come out of the Persian Gulf now either. So that's going to impact food production.
Yes.
And if it impacts food production, it means the grocery bill at the shops are going up too. So we all as Anguillians have a stake in this.
Yes.
And I think that it's an incentive to the renewable energy development. You know, we have to do this.
Yes.
We just have to.
So, Mr. Carty, I just want to follow up on one thing that you'd have mentioned in terms of Anguilla's ability to achieve net zero by 2035. But before I get to that question, you'd have mentioned that the first phase of the financing that we're going through CDB has been a very bureaucratic process, but that the future phases of financing should be much easier. I just want for the people of Anguilla, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the cost savings that we would get from phase 1 that has been projected would not only be able to service the loan, but have significant enough savings to be able to pay for phase 2 and phase 3. Is that the reason why financing would be able to go, and is that a true statement?
Well, I'm hoping that big time. I am hoping that we can save enough to easily finance. I want to be careful. I mean, you know, we haven't made all the projections, exactly right yet, and the 12 megawatts will prove it. But I believe strongly that we will be able, our future board, it won't be our board, at least I don't think so, be able to say, hey, let's reinvest this and go for another 12 megawatts or whatever. I mean, wind is a huge issue. Wind is something that we can look into. Of course, the wind blows at night, so that's a possibility. We're very encouraged by it. I've always been very nervous about wind with hurricanes, but we've just learned that Whitcoff, a wind farm in Jamaica, that was very close to the destruction caused by Hurricane Melissa, survived quite well. That's good news. So, these things are what we have to focus on. Anglec has to keep focusing on these issues. Whether it's this board and this management or future boards and future management, you got to keep the main thing is to keep the main thing. That's the only way we're gonna get the transition.
And all things being equal, keeping the main thing. When can we see our 12 megawatt farm in
Minister, I expected you would ask that.
Best case scenario, worst case scenario.
Well, worst case scenario, I mean, you don't want any hurricanes to keep us back. But I have asked the board as early as this morning, members of the board, to please hustle with the establishment of the project management unit. We have to put out the advertisements to fill this group of technical people that will do the job. Once they're in position, then we start to draw down money from CDB. That's a condition that CDB has asked us. We have to have this group in place before they give us a dime. But once we have the, right. So at that point in time, we can order. You know, I have to manage expectations here, and I know that you want answers. CDB is saying that our loan, the whole project might take up to 2 years. I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I believe we could do that in a lot less. But I want to be careful here, Premier. Don't hold me to that.
Had to ask the question. Had to ask.
I'll be a little less careful because in my conversations with the CDB president, I told him 2 years is way too long.
Okay,
and he has expressed his support to crack the whip on his team to help accelerate that timeline as much as possible.
Wonderful.
So I'm hoping well in advance of that, the people of Angola will be able to see the tangible benefits of renewable energy.
The biggest. I am confident, knowing Angola's ability in construction, knowing Angola's ability in terms of skill sets to build things. I am very bullish that we would do it a lot faster. The bottleneck is that these technologies come from China, and again, the geopolitical situation, you never know. You never know. I mean, you hear rumbling now about the Panama Canal, so yes. Will that hold up shipments from China coming up to Jamaica and transferring them to St. Martin and over to us? I don't know. I mean, you know, that's why I have to be responsible and cautious and not give you or the people of Angola at this point in time a date. But I'm hoping that we will be in a position to say in a while how long this would take.
Premier, if I may, just while on the topic of timelines, Mr. Carty, you'd have mentioned that despite Angola not being where it needs to be now due to a lack of decisive action before, from the point of your board coming in 2025, you did express that Angola has the potential to be net zero, yes. Whether through the work of subsequent boards by 2035. Yes. So to go completely from being 100% dependent on fossil fuels to completely net zero within 10 years, I think would be an incredible feat.
Incredible.
But on that note, I would have highlighted it before in the public, but I do want to get your thoughts for the general public who may not have known that Angola has been one of the most recent signatories to the Blue Planet Alliance. Right. So for persons who wouldn't know, the Blue Planet Alliance is a nonprofit that is based out of Hawaii, and every 6 months, they bring together 8 to 10 small island developing states. They bring together delegations. Angola would have sent a delegation that would have had representatives from the ministry, from the Public Utilities Commission, which would form the regulatory function, from the utility, as well as a community and youth representative. And these 8 to 10 delegations come together and they discuss renewable energy transition. Hawaii has actually legislated that they have to be 100% net zero, completely 100% renewable energies by 2045. And as a result of us signing on to the Blue Planet Alliance, and just again, for clarity of the people of Angola, seeing that this is an international agreement, we have cleared it with the governor's office, who have gotten clearance from the United Kingdom for us to be able to sign on to the alliance. So Angola now, as a signatory, has access to these resources globally, whether we can pull on resources from Hawaii, learn from their mistakes, pull on resources from around the world, and be able to pool our collective thoughts to figure out how best do we transition. So when we have questions, there are a number of resources we now have access to help guide our transition. And while the goal of the Blue Planet Alliance is for signatories to transition to net zero by 2045, I'm a firm believer that Angola, even though we're a bit behind in the game right now, given our small size and our agility, yes, has the ability to be the first of all of the signatories to yes, make that goal a reality.
Right.
So it would be beautiful, if not only by 2035, but before anybody else in the Blue Planet Alliance makes it to that goal, that Angola be the first country in the world to be completely net zero.
Yeah, well, Minister, I support you 1,000% on that. I use the Jamaica expression with little but with talawa. But, you know, just for the benefit of the listening public, net zero means zero greenhouse gas emissions. Now we've already started, you know, you got Motor World next door trying to build a showroom for electric cars. Electric cars already been sold, right? I spoke to a gentleman from Island Harbor who told me he got a second-hand electric vehicle and he drove it from, he had a job in West End, if I'm thinking right now, and he made 3 round trips from Island Harbor to his work, and he spent 10 EC to Anglec to charge the batteries. I don't know how exactly you figured that out, but it was very interesting. The fact is that electrification is the way of the future. There are powerful forces, thank God, around the world who understand the threat of greenhouse gas emissions to the climate. And there are a lot of, the same way the bandits who want to put everything into oil are out there, there are those who are putting a lot of emphasis on how we achieve net zero, including Blue Planet, right? So you're right on the money. And Anguilla is in the absolutely unique position because it is one island. It is not an archipelago. It's not like Cayman Islands. It's not like the Bahamas. Anglec has already connected the entire island in its distribution system. So it is very easy for Anguilla to achieve that goal, right? By simply focusing on renewables already, and I've already explained that to you, all can be done in Carty. We don't have to worry about putting a windmill in your backyard or in my front yard, nothing like that. It's already there. All we have to do is go through the steps with the planning department and make sure all those steps are taken care of. But to achieve that, for Anguilla to achieve that, it is not just the economic savings that really should be driving us. It is the understanding that you are now in a position to use a vital resource, electricity, as a means of conservation, taking care of the planet and taking care of your little 35 square miles and your little God-given paradise. You using things the right way, in a conservative way, in a conservational way, to make life a little better. That to me is a shift. I've always thought of this whole initiative as a shift in thinking. You know, there was a old sea captain's wife in Sandy Ground, used to live in Sandy Ground, a lady called Miss Buddy. And she had a saying, you gotta learn how to multiply meanness by lowness. And it was a roundabout way of saying, convoluted way of saying, what old Anguillians would tell you, you know, cut your cloth to suit the garment. You know, use your resources wisely. And the history of Anguilla shows that is how this little society survived in the face of utter destitution and poverty since the destruction of the society in 1796 with the French invasion. So Anguilla has always survived by its wits. And for us now, in a very modern age, with a far more educated society, far more prosperous economy, far more with it in terms of global vision and being part of the planet and entrepreneurship and all the rest of that, if we can now be sure that our electricity, which is foundational to everything in a modern society, is all owned by us, God helping us make it, and we using it, and we don't need your oil and your gasoline, right? I mean, that is a huge achievement for a small society, which is absolutely doable.
Minister, Mr. Carty, I am cognizant we have gone long beyond our time, but it would be remiss of me if I do not ask this final question. The property formerly known as Caracas Bay, what is the status of that?
Sorry, say that again.
Caracas Bay property that was purchased by
yes.
Anglec. Can you give an update to the people of Anguilla as to that?
Well, that has been a rough road for us. We have bought the property. I don't say rough road presently, but it's just another problem that has to be solved. We bought the property. I think we've made a very good decision. I think there's a vision for that in the fullness of time would be a very impressive addition to what will be in the future the city of the valley. We've been sandbagged a bit by procurement issues and a lot of difficulties, bureaucratic issues between ourselves and procurement. But we're at the verge of getting past that, and I'm very positive that action will start taking place very shortly. That will begin to move it in the direction we had hoped to move it months ago.
It's 5 acres of land?
Yes.
And the vision is for all of
Well,
Anglec to be housed
over
there?
time it will transition to what I hope will be a really cool Anglec headquarters in time. It's not over, it's not immediate. Of course, the focus still has to be the renewables.
That's correct.
But in the savings and hopefully the wholesome development of the company, I think in time it will be something that we can all be very proud of, although right now it doesn't look that way. I'm sure it will, in time to come.
Thank you. Minister, do you have any parting words as we close this evening?
Well, thank you for hosting us, Premier. I want to extend my sincerest gratitude to Chairman Mr. Carty, not only for his attendance here, but for all of the hard work that him and all of the board members have been undertaking. I want to thank all of the persons who are currently serving on the board. I want to also extend sincere gratitude to Mr. Sutcliffe Hodge for all of the efforts that he made during his tenure as CEO of the company. And I want to reassure the people of Anguilla that despite all of the global uncertainty, the rising prices of fuel, that we as a government remain committed to not only putting people first, but to ensuring that this renewable energy transition is realized not only for the people of today, for the cost of living today, but for generations to come. So while there are a lot of persons out there, we'll continue to ignore the noise and keep on working on behalf of the people of Anguilla.
Thank you very much. Mr. Carty, final words from you.
Thank you again, Premier. Thank you, Minister. We have a lot of work to do. The government has to step up. We need your help with revised legislations and regulations in the Electricity Act and how it is governed. We need some protections there that have to be updated by new legislation. We are very grateful so far for the government in its support, especially with the acquisition of the lands that has been huge. And we look forward to a continued good relationship with the government. We know we are separate. We are not a government department, and we have to be careful how we not step on each other's toes. But so far, so good. And I think both your government and the board that I chair are aware of the lines that we should not cross and where our duties intersect for the benefit of not only Anglec and the government, but all the people of Anguilla. So I hope we can achieve all of that.
Thank you. And let me take this opportunity to thank you. We know it's probably past your bedtime.
Oh, yes.
Minister, I'm not so sure if it's past yours. It's very close to past mine. And so I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you once again, Mr. Carty, Minister, for being here. And ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this evening's Just the Facts. Thank you for joining us and have a blessed night.